Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I'm Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about the continuing fallout from Trump's tariff plan and a few extra topics. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you would like to hear some extra content, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. Alright, real quick listeners, before we get started. At the end of last episode, I mentioned that we'll be making some changes to the channel. It's soon going to be renamed to Contemporary Conservative. But if you're already subscribed to Conservative Conversations, it's not going to affect you too much, except a new name and an extra show. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the biggest news that's been going on, which of course is the stock market reaction to all the tariff Liberation Day, as Trump has called it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Everybody's been talking about it. I mean, when you log on, it's what you see on YouTube. It's what all the... I mean, I have some regular talking heads I listen to. You know, it's what they're talking about. It's what everybody's talking about. So...
but of course, as you're listening to this, it's going to be on Wednesday, so hopefully things are... at least looking a little better by then. But time will surely tell. The way I feel about it, it's only causes me some concern, but ultimately, I guess I just have faith that it'll work out, because Trump's a results guy, and if it's not getting the right or good results that he wants, then he'll do something different. And I still think for the most part, all the tariffs are negotiating tools, but I don't know. I think, at least for me, I'm just going to be patient and see how it all works out. I think he probably could do a better, explaining of what the end goal is.
I could fault for some of that too. Right,
and stuff like that. But like I said, I have faith that'll work out. It usually does. He even kind of said it himself when he was being asked questions on Air Force One that he's not going to let it. He doesn't want everything to go bad.
Right.
He don't want the market to just crater.
Of course not.
Completely.
But it's about, you can't withhold the medicine.
Right. Yeah.
He was trying to quote like something Margaret Thatcher used to say, but he didn't. She used to say, but he didn't do it very well.
Right. Yeah.
If the medicine is harsh to cure the patient, do you withhold the medicine? No. Right. You give the medicine, even if the medicine is harsh.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he has said that it's going to be, a bit uncomfortable, and we'll probably feel a little bit of economic pain at first.
Smart people know that.
Right.
We've been saying, I mean, even if you just casually play in the market, you kind of know there's been chatter for quite a while that a market correction was coming.
Right. Right, and the tariffs themselves aren't total surprises. He's been talking about them forever.
Absolutely. Now, are you ready for my side of it?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, go.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the fact that everybody's talking and some people are squawking really shows like we've analyzed with other things with Trump and his effectiveness is he's really causing some waves, not ripples, but waves here. And I've heard some analysis out there, and this is what kills me, is like the small-minded people who are out there saying, well, do you know that he's even taxing, like, he's putting a 10% tariff on these tiny, insignificant countries that we don't trade with. Can you believe that?
I've heard we're tariffing the penguins.
Yeah, he's so stupid. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's such a fool. We don't even trade with these people. Well, then what's it matter? Why is it so offensive? Okay, here's the rub. Big countries like China. We're mostly talking about China. I'll do it like Trump. China, we're talking about China. You tariff them in one market, tariff one avenue, one district of trade.
Right.
They're going to find another way. They often do this. You just suddenly make a contract with Thailand or some outfit in Singapore.
Right.
And you move the goods to Singapore, you get a different stamp on it, send them into the U.S. Guess what? There's still a trade imbalance. There's still tariff issues. They're just subverting. So by universally or near universal, you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's not universal, but by the concept of this reciprocal tariff, we're going to tariff anybody that tariffs us right back. And it's just going to be clear across the board. In that sense, it is universal. Right?
Right.
It's actually ingenious because if China wants to move from one market to another, maybe they're just avoiding some tax, but they're not avoiding, do you see what I'm saying? The tariffs altogether. There's no way that a bad actor, I mean, ideally, I'm sure that a bad actor still could, but you get what I'm saying. Ideally, this eliminates those escape routes or alternative shipping lanes or whatever however you want to say it. Right? Wouldn't you agree with that? Like, in that sense, I think it's actually genius because a big country like China might use some smaller country as a third party just to get the goods here to us.
Right, which is what they're claiming to basically do with Mexico. They send a bunch of stuff through Mexico to send it here, right?
And I'm sure other countries too. I mean, when I was doing the research of this, it cited a bunch of, and that's why I was coming up with ones where they're probably all republics. I was just naming some Asian countries, but they really usually do that, I guess. It's a pretty regular song and dance for them to just move stuff to a place just outside of China, change the stamp, essentially, and have the goods imported here as if they're not Chinese goods when they are. They're wholly Chinese goods. They've just traded hands.
Right. As far as the tariffs themselves go, I think it's in part a matter of finding like the right balance, and also I think Scott Bessent, the treasurer, head of the Treasury, he had a pretty good quote about it over the weekend. I mean, if tariffs are so bad, why are other countries using them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just tell you something. I can get hardcore sometimes. And what I can't believe is he's been saying reciprocal. Well, I don't want to get too nuanced, but I could say like three things. First of all, I don't think it's actually being applied universally. Like, it's not being applied, in my understanding, to every single country we trade with. We're not just like putting tariffs on people. Secondly, and most importantly, is for the people who charge us huge tariffs, we're only applying half of their tariff, which kind of boggles my mind. There are some countries like China in certain markets where they charge us like a 67% tariff. Well, we're only charging them like a 35% tariff in those markets or on those things or whatever. We're only doing half, except for countries that there's a floor. If you charge us less than let's say a 20%, we only charge 10. So even if you charge us 25%, we only charge you 10. Unless it's over a certain threshold, then we charge you half of what you're charging us. So, I mean, I just can't believe it. I mean, because Navarro and all those guys in the White House, they have this beautiful chart that they've been putting up, and it shows how much those countries are charging us in tariffs, and then it shows, according to this new schedule, what we're charging them as the reciprocal tariff. So there's two columns, right? And when I saw that some markets are charging us 67% tariff and we're only slapping back a 35, I'm thinking, well, that's not reciprocal, not by definition. But whatever. I mean, I get it. I think it is just a strategy tool. I think it's to bring people to heel, countries to heel, to get this trading imbalance straightened up. And I think we're going to get there. I almost know it. I don't know. I don't really have any skepticism at all.
Right. The whole trade imbalance thing is one aspect I don't get in some parts, because, okay, say we buy more things from Canada than Canada's buying from us, so what do we do, just make Canada buy more stuff from us? Well, they don't need it.
I think it makes sense if you look at it from Trump's eyes, if you really do look at it from Trump's eyes, because that's whose eyes we're having to look at it through. Really, he's the one addressing this issue. He's the one with the power to do this. He's the one who's been put there because he's been harping on about these issues. And I don't think it's just about making them buy our stuff. But if you actually look at the nuances to things, they often prohibit us from markets, not by cost, not by, they put these sort of arbitrary restrictions, especially if you look at the EU, some of these things. And I mean, I get it. We're really unhealthy. It's why we've got, what's-his-face as HHS secretary. We've got stuff in our food and our stuff that other people don't want, and we probably shouldn't use either. But if you really get into the nitty-gritty, there are certain things where they just put up, non-monetary tariffs. That's what they're being called. Just restrictions on our goods. They'll say, we won't take this because X, Y, and Z. Not that it's a bad product, not that they don't want it, not that they wouldn't use it, their people wouldn't use it. They just mark it for some reason. Do you see what I'm saying? Almost arbitrary. And I think that's what needs to be balanced a little bit. And we're willing to balance it here too. That's why we have people like Kennedy as HHS secretary, because we're going to be taking some of this stuff out, whether it's bad to industry or not. Some of this stuff does need to be addressed, but the whole thing, everything needs to be balanced. And I think that's how you have to look at it, is if you had truly or much closer to free markets, they wouldn't be able to just say, well, that's not our standard. An American pencil ought to be able to sell just right next to a Canadian pencil. And if the consumer wants to choose based on X, Y, or Z, that should be up to the consumer.
I mean, I guess I get that in some parts. And I guess I'll be interested to see what kind of product restrictions that we have that we're going to eliminate. That'd be interesting to find out.
We don't have that many. If you look at a chart, and one has been published, if you look at what people have as far as, and this chart did a beautiful job. It's a very simple chart. It just showed cost, like tariffs, cost of entry into a market, and then it showed non-monetary cost of entry into a market by country. And we're the lowest. We have, I mean, it kind of makes a certain amount of sense. We have some of the lowest standards in the world as far as entry to our market.
Right. Well, then I guess I would like to hear the president explain the whole trade deficit things, because on its face, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But I'd like to hear more from him. Then.
He has, hang on, let me just, he has answered it, because it's about what you've seen. You have all these people investing to come here, start factories here. It's so that it's an even playing field. I mean, we've talked about this and been following it. If you have a situation where you have to close your borders down again, you can't be relying on other nations to be sending in your vital things. We have to be able to have some of our own markets here. And that's what you're doing, is you've seen ever since Clinton and the easy days of NAFTA and all of that, where everybody just outsourced. And people said, oh, well, having cheaper goods is better. Well, no, that was always wrong because of the long term. You can't import everything. And so that's what he's doing, is he's sort of forcing, we have to have a manufacturing base in this country.
Right, I get that, and that's going to take a while to build
It
up.
is. It's going to take longer than his 4 years.
Right. I mean, but I still don't see how that exactly is necessary. I mean, I get how it helps trade imbalances, but I don't see how trade imbalances themselves are a huge issue.
But because they've gone on for 20 plus years. That's why. Is because they probably should have been corrected every 4 years. But sometimes you have people who just don't like giving harsh medicine. Things don't get corrected when they should. People prop up industries and prop up markets and prop up things. And this has been a long time coming. We have to have American manufacturing.
Right, but I mean, so are we going to switch then to the opposite? Are we going to be, is the balance going to be the other way?
I think it'll just, ideally, it would be much closer to being even keel. So that, I mean, ideally, from a nationalist perspective, you would want to be able to satisfy your own people at any given time. If you need iron ore, if you need corn, whatever you need, you ought to be able to supply to your people. Ideally. Now, this isn't a conceptual world, right? But you'd get much closer to that. There's no way to make this a real ideal pie in the sky world where, yes, you're always going to have some kind of imbalance if that's just your point. You're always going to have some kind of imbalance. But the point here is that, like, basically since World War II, if you want to go back that far, we have just allowed, see, it's like just more and more and more. What more can we give you? What more can America do for the world? What more can we do? Now, some of it has been in the vein of control. A lot of people would argue that, but it doesn't change the calculus that we have been overextending ourselves, and we can't provide for our own people in the sense of certain drugs, antibiotics, so in some cases, clothing. You have stuff that's made here, but if you switch to a wartime scenario, could our American manufacturers keep up with the demand, all of the Americans' demand for clothing? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you'd want it to be more even keel. I think he's just trying to force like a rebalancing.
Well, I guess in my mind, I just see reshoring some important manufacturing at home as being not necessarily the same issue as just resolving the levels of exports versus imports to certain countries.
Well, he usually has a way of boiling things down to something that we wouldn't all agree with. He puts these monikers on stuff that we wouldn't all agree with, but I think there's more, I think there's more method here than there is madness. I really do.
Right. Yeah, and I get that. That's why ultimately I still believe it'll work out in the end. I guess there's some aspects I'd like to see some better explanation on.
I do agree with you on that. I just wonder if you don't follow some of these guys, like Peter Navarro. He's amazing. I don't think he always speaks the best, but I mean, I don't know, but some of this literature or these charts, the data that they put out is great data. You should check it out. Everybody should check it out. I highly recommend Peter Navarro. He's a genius on some level. Not in the traditional sense, but... And I don't think he's the best communicator. And I get where you're coming from on that sense. I don't think they're putting forth the best PR on their financials. But I think a lot of this has been hotly debated. You've had a lot of guys in the Fed and in the public and in academia that believe a completely different way. They have a different school of thought, and that has been the status quo, I mean, for my lifetime.
Right. Well, I guess that's all I got on the whole tariff stuff. I'm sure it'll work out. Don't overreact to the Don't hit sell because you don't lose your money until you hit that sell button, folks. And if your portfolios are causing you undue stress, maybe you should reconsider what your portfolios are.
Yeah, I've seen some markets have recovered already. Some people are reporting like 2, 3, 4% already back up.
Yep. It'll work out.
I'm really not worried.
No,
Some
no,
reports
man.
I saw said that, I mean, some headlines are very sensational, but they're talking about people already begging Trump and bending the knee and
We got 50 countries lined up to negotiate.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So what's your next topic here?
My next one is about Elon. He's
right.
really... You want me to roll with it?
Yeah, go.
He's really been in the headlines a lot recently. And I happened to come across an article by the Federalist, which is definitely the best article I've read this year. I love it. It's right up my alley because I minored in philosophy when I was in college, and I've known this for a while. I mean, just a throwback, just between you and me. But you remember Sean, the creepy guy who used to live in my grandma's basement?
Oh, yeah.
He was one of the first people that I ever got into a real conversation with about the concept of transhumanism. And I'd played with the idea conceptually before because I'd run into it, in reading. I've danced around with the idea of transhumanism before. I'm aware of it. But it wasn't until I encountered Sean, I hope I haven't said his last name, I probably did, but okay, Sean, that I really encountered somebody who actually believed this kind of stuff. And so, in a way, I've always been marked by that conversation and by that experience. And it's kind of a point on which I can judge people. Like, if you believe in that kind of thing, transhumanism, then I sort of treat you with kid gloves because I think we're different people. We're apples and oranges, in my opinion. And that's basically, I mean, I'm being overly kind to myself, but that's basically what this article is talking about, is about how somebody who considers themselves to be a transhumanist like Elon Musk and who's worked for these kinds of things, like one thinks of, what is it called? Cyberlink, or what's the one where it goes in your body?
Oh, Neuralink.
Neuralink, yeah. Some of these steps on those fronts, like, it all sounds really nice, helping the blind to see and those with cerebral palsy not to shake and whatever, all the benefits, not trying to dismiss any or be flippant about it, but they always say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I don't know. I just know that. Okay, but anyway, the title of this is that a transhumanist could never be a conservative, a true conservative. And I found that so interesting. I had to click on the headline, had to read it. And I totally agree with it. I think it's very deep. I actually think it's deeper than the article. I think the article could be a book, if you want to ask my opinion. But it's wonderful because, and I'm not trying to knock Elon Musk. Actually, why I wanted to point this out is because since there's been so much hate going his way, that I wanted to point out that if you're going to be critical of somebody, of Elon Musk or whatever, that this is the way to do it. You talk about their, what they value. You talk about the decisions they make, how they justify things, how they think, how they rationalize.
Right.
Not just in characterizations and say, oh, he's got 26 kids and he's a terrible dad. What's that got to do with what? That doesn't have anything to do with anything. And but this kind of argument where you say, transhumanism and conservatism don't really mix well, I think that's a great argument. It's a great critique. It's one that I share.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one I actually do hold Elon in esteem, but I'd love him to read the article.
Right.
And I'd love him to tell me his thoughts on the article. Not to try to put down the article or disclaim the article or whatever, but to tell me his thoughts on the article.
Right. Yeah, I think that definitely sounds pretty interesting. I find it kind of weird that they're, at least for like a lot of the very online type conservatives, the Republicans have turned him into an uber rock star of some sorts just because he's saying the things we like. But I still don't ultimately see Elon as a conservative for sure.
No.
I mean, he definitely has some common values that we believe in and like to see him support, but I not at any point would have slapped the conservative label on Elon Musk.
I just think it's what's really interesting if you want to get into the nuance of it is, of course, every man is driven by some kind of desire in some sense. But I'm not sure that Elon's is bad. Even
Right.
though we may disagree and there may be some small issues with certain things, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that he should just be discredited.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And a real quick sort of related story. Over the weekend were these hands-off protests, or I think they went by also 50-51 protests, something like that. And there were even some right here in Columbus, Ohio. And I listened to a clip, and it's basically what you expected. They're out there protesting because they think Donald Trump and Elon Musk are stealing their democracy away right before their eyes, and I don't know, things like that. I thought were kind of silly. And then, of course, they were happening nationwide, and there were, bunch of Democrats, well, maybe not a bunch, but a few Democrats showed up to them, and they were doing these chants where they say hands off, and then they name something like hands off Social Security, hands off Medicare, or whatever. And my favorite one was hands off trans kids or children. And I immediately said out loud after I heard that, I was like, yeah, right, hands off, God's children who are made the way they're supposed to be made. So it's just silly, some of the stuff they're out there chanting about. But I guess that's all I really had on it. They were going on this weekend, and they're about what you would expect from Democrat protests these days.
Well, I saw some really interesting footage where like one guy seemed very unknowledgeable. He was being interviewed by just one of these man on the street YouTube people. I'm not sure.
Right.
I don't know his channel or can't shout him out, but he was being interviewed, this random guy with a sign, and he was like, I don't know. He's like, somebody gave me this sign. And he was like, and they gave me some literature. And he pulls out the literature and starts trying to quote it, and then the guy's like, oh, they gave you this? And he's like, here, yeah, you can have it. He literally gives away his like talking points to the guy who's asking questions. So these are like almost like paid protesters. I mean,
yeah, that's definitely some of the suspicion that goes around.
Well, yes, and I'll tell you, the only other thing that I have to add is I happened to tune into somebody's YouTube live earlier who does political discussions, not on our side of the fence, because sometimes I like to listen around. And he was being chastised by his audience for not being out and being part of anything, and he's like, well. He basically says innuendo. This is me talking, not him. But he basically says, well, I wasn't paid to be there. You get what I'm saying? He's like, well, I wasn't getting paid. Nobody told me to go.
Right. Yeah, I just thought it was, I didn't know anything about them until over the weekend. The local news. I have the local news app on my phone and get notifications from them, and I got one about those. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I had seen, that clip from the local news on YouTube from it. But, I guess that is all we have for this week, right? Are you finished with your topics?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, that's all I had. And listeners, if you enjoyed this conservative conversation, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, or subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We would greatly appreciate it.
That's right. And as always, we thank you for listening.